All right, good evening. Connection. Some of you might be familiar with our Choose Life acronym. How many of you have heard of our Choose Life acronym? All right, so quite a few of you. And Choose Life, the first letter is a C. What do you think that might stand for? Connection, that's right. Because connection is the most foundational aspect of mental health. And if we don't have that connection to ourselves, we don't have that connection to each other, we don't have that connection to God, we really don't have anything. And I was really excited when we chose this theme for tonight's meeting, because this to me is where we need to start and end when it comes to mental health. So let's get into a few statistics and slides so that you can see some of the science behind connection, because it's always nice when we can see that connection is not just something that kind of feels good, but there's amazing scientific evidence that shows the power of connection. All right, so we'll start with the Harvard study of adult development. Now, this was actually one of the longest running studies ever. It started all the way back in 1938, and it included boys from Harvard, which were the richer, more elite, and then also boys from the poorest areas of Boston. And basically, they followed these individuals their whole lives and did all sorts of testing and interviews because they wanted to find out, when it came to health, when it came to mental and physical health, what were the keys that would drive good mental and physical health? What they found was that those who were socially disconnected had more depression, experienced earlier cognitive decline, and died sooner. On the other hand, those who were the most satisfied with their relationships at the age 50 were the healthiest at age 80 and lived longer. And I think that's fascinating, right? Because here we see that it wasn't just that they were emotionally better off, but even physically, there was a tremendous impact. And we can see that our mental health, our relational health, has so much to do with longevity, yes, with happiness, but also with physical health as well. One of the reasons for that is that connection actually changes neuroplasticity and gene expression. We all have certain predispositions in our genetic makeup, genes that we've inherited from our parents, right? And sometimes we inherit genes that maybe predispose us to some not so good things. But did you know that based on the choices that we make in what we eat, the things that we do like exercise or not, and yes, if we connect with one another in a meaningful way, that can actually turn on the good genes and turn off the bad genes. And I love that because it helps us see that even if there's some genes that we're not so happy that we inherited, a lot of those genes don't necessarily need to be expressed, or some of the good ones can be turned on by things like connection. Loneliness, on the other hand, is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. It's actually worse for your health than obesity or high blood pressure. All right. Go on. And the lead researcher on the Harvard study of adult development says socially disconnected people are less happy, their health declines earlier in midlife, their brain functioning declines sooner, and they live shorter lives than people who are not lonely. I want to illustrate this through one interesting social experiment that was conducted. There were 3 communities. Roseto, Pennsylvania, was an Italian-American town, and this town was very close to Bangor and Nazareth. And these communities actually were served by the same hospital, they had the same water supply, and even the same physicians. So the question that researchers started looking at was, why was the incidence of heart attacks so much lower in Roseto than these other two communities? Because again, very similar demographics, right? So why was it actually lower? And you think with all that good Italian food that maybe the risk of heart attack might even be a little bit higher, right? But it actually wasn't. So what was really interesting, what the researchers found, is in Roseto, what are Italians known for besides the food? They're known for family, right? And they're known for connection. They're known for, like, if you come over to an Italian's house, they're there to give you a big hug. And of course, like waving, there are a lot of body language, right? And that is very conducive for connection. So what they found was the biggest difference was that there was actually tremendous community cohesion. And fascinatingly, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Roseto lost much of its community cohesion. The heart attack mortality rose to the same level as Bangor and Nazareth. Very fascinating, isn't it? The importance of connection. 8 large-scale community-based studies showed that with all-cause mortality, the socially isolated are at least 2 to 5 times the risk of premature death from all causes when compared to those who had a strong sense of connection and community. That's a huge difference, isn't it? This was a very interesting study where Dr. David Spiegel at Stanford, he got kind of tired of hearing all this fluffy stuff about connection and the importance of all of that. And he decided, you know what? I'm going to do a study that will disprove this once and for all, that this really doesn't make a difference. He was a pure scientist, right? So he actually set out to test this idea in women with breast cancer. And so he had 2 groups, and they were randomly assigned, and both received conventional medical care. But one group, the one big difference was that one group met together for 90 minutes once a week for a year. And what's really interesting is that he didn't look at the results for quite some time. But this is what he actually ends up saying at the end. He says, 5 years later, I finally got around to looking at the data, and I almost fell off my chair. Those women who had the weekly support group lived on average twice as long as did the other group. In fact, all the women in the comparison group were dead at 5 years. And so after that really turned him into a believer. And there's other studies that show the importance of connection in cancer survival, as well as all sorts of other health conditions. And what about pets? Do you think that sometimes we can feel connected and supported by our pets? Amen. So they've done studies on this. Patients recently hospitalized with a heart attack or chest pain. After 1 year, only 6% of pet owners died, compared to 28% of patients who did not own pets. Isn't that amazing? That's more than a 400% difference. And then there was another study. The effect of a dog on lowering blood pressure reactivity was even greater than the presence of a good friend. So now we know dogs are truly man's best friend, since the friend was often perceived as judgmental, whereas the dog was not. And I love that about our animals, right? They don't care if our hair is all crazy, or if we have bad breath, or even if we're a little grumpy. They still wag their tails and they're happy to see us. It's amazing. All right, let's go on to the next. And what do you think is more important when it comes to the benefits of relationships, giving or receiving? Actually giving. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a place to receive. Actually, that's also important as well. And some of us are maybe overgivers, right? It's important that we also allow ourselves to receive as well. But overall, they've done studies that show that the effects of aging, and they've done other volunteer studies, have more to do with what they contributed to their social support network than what they received from it. Now, Dean Ornish, he was actually the first internal medicine physician to prove scientifically that heart disease could be reversed. So he was not a psychiatrist, not a mental health clinician, and he put together this really amazing holistic program to reverse heart disease. And at the end of all that, when he was doing all this nutritional intervention, stress management, exercise, etc., this is what he said and what he concluded. He says, "I'm not aware of any other factor in medicine, not diet, not smoking, not exercise, not drugs, not surgery, that has a greater impact on our quality of life, incidence of illness, and premature death from all causes than does love and intimacy." So we've talked about how vital connection is for our health, for our mood, even our longevity. So you might be asking, how? How do we connect? And we've heard a little bit about that already from what Dr. Katie was sharing, what Darcy was sharing. You know, connection, does it happen automatically? Not so as good as it could, right? It's actually something that we practice. Did you know that connection is something that we can get good at? And the good news is, small things actually do make a big difference. I'd like to sum this up with the word BEAM. BEAM, B-E-A-M. It's an acronym. Because when we connect well, we really do beam, and we help each other to shine. So the B stands for be present. Be present. Sometimes we need to put these things down, right? That's what Dr. Katie mentioned in what she was sharing earlier. These things can sometimes be a barrier. Sometimes we can go to a restaurant and we see families just all on their devices, and are they really connecting? Well, they're connecting with their device, but not with each other, right? There's a lot to be said for slowing down and really spending time being present in the moment with each other. One of my most favorite times of every day when I come to work is to actually step away from the computer. I still have my computer there as I'm seeing patients, but put it to the side and just being present with the individual in the room, just noticing what's going on in their life and really not thinking, okay, who's my next patient? What do I need to do later? But being in the here and now. That's really the only thing that we have, is the moment right now. And when we're so in our head, then we are actually robbing ourselves and the people around us of the present. And presence is the foundation of connection. The E stands for express warmth. A kind word, a smile, gentle humor. Warmth tells people what? You are safe here. You're safe, right? And the A stands for ask, and then there's a second word, attend. Ask and attend. Show real curiosity. Ask, how are you really doing? And then attend to the answer. Following up later actually helps trust to grow. If someone opens up when we ask, and then we never, and they, especially when they share something that's really important to them, but then we kind of, we kind of ignore it or brush it off, or maybe we don't follow up later, then that actually can destroy trust. So it's important that we pay attention to what they're actually saying. If someone is being vulnerable and opening up, we need to then attend. And then the M stands for mirroring feelings. So reflect back what you sense. That sounds really hard. or you seem really excited about that. People feel most connected when they feel felt, And that really has to do with empathy. So if you remember one thing from what I'm sharing this evening, I want you to remember this. Connection is built. It's not found, and you can build it by learning to beam your presence wherever you go. And when you beam connection, others light up too.